Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, the podcast where two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journeys and how they navigate mental wellness while working in the mental health field. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. To support the show, head over to patreon.com/wellnesswithjer. I'm a mental health professional, not a podcast professional, so any little support helps. Today, I'm back with another two-timer. This is my second two-time guest in as many episodes. I am joined today by Emily Vander Velden of Renewed Focus. I don't think you had launched last time I had you on. It was in the works, but it wasn't a done deal.
Yep, it's under the radar yet.
Yeah, so we have a topic in mind, but let's start there with how's opening your own practice been?
A learning curve, and also I haven't hated it, if that makes sense. Like the learning curve itself has been intellectually stimulating, lots of good puzzles to solve. So,
Yep.
I mean, I love being able to like tailor exactly what makes my practice unique, and
Yeah.
it is, I still have a lot of ideas. So I think it's been going really well.
Awesome.
I appreciate
Welcome
you.
to the private practice party.
Yeah, right. You're one of my mentors, Jeremy. You're like, I did it.
I am proud of you for doing it. I take very little credit for being a mentor. That sounds old of me.
Yeah, we're old.
I know. Aged millennials here. Before we show our age even more, we're gonna talk about social media today.
Seriously.
Two things that we as mid-30s millennials have thoughts on.
We are uniquely poised in our own experiences of maybe growing up where there wasn't social media into a whole new reality where there is basically like a part of the water we're swimming in. So
yeah, I had a OG Facebook account when it was just for people at Harvard or Yale or wherever Zuckerberg was. Harvard, I think.
really?
But then it was just for people with edu email addresses, just for college students. So like that's when I got it.
Same. Yeah.
Because
Probably like
we're old.
2007, 2008.
Yeah, I got it because I was playing volleyball at Minnesota, and that is how we communicated things, was Facebook. And just for college students at that time.
Mm-hmm. The glory days of Facebook.
Yeah. Did you have a MySpace? Let's go back even further.
I think I did. I don't know that I was too engaged with it. I had like a virtual diary, and I cannot remember what it's called, but I really liked my virtual diary. It's like basically the beginning blogs.
Yeah, for sure.
That I probably freshman, sophomore year had.
Yeah, I think I had a MySpace, but also didn't engage with it. I was on AOL Instant Messenger all of the time. That's how my wife and I, not that we got married straight from there, but we connected a lot through AIM back in the day when we were high schoolers dating and didn't know anything.
I love that. Oh my gosh. AIM. I miss AIM. AIM was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was free.
I'm sure it was. It was free. I'm sure it was very cringy. I mean, changing your color text and background colors and song quotes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what was your screen name for AIM?
Oh man, I don't remember. It might have been Velcro Shoe. My last name's Schumacher.
Oh,
so Shoe with SCHU. I was using like Awesome Shoe a lot back in the day too. I don't know what might be out on the internet from my teenage self, so I don't want to dox myself. But yeah, that was a thing. So I'm not sure at which point in my life I was and what I was using.
got it. Okay, that's fair.
The adult version of that is like picking the name of your business.
Right? Absolutely. I use like a name generator for my screen name and totally used the equivalent of that to help me figure out what name I liked for my business.
Yeah, we like to pretend like we've grown up so much, but it's just the same thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think so. This is interesting. The last time I was really, really in social media world, like with Facebook actively using it, was 2015.
Sure.
You
Probably a
know,
good time to get off of it.
you know this about me.
Yeah, the only question we were talking before I hit record, like I didn't put any thought or effort into this. You just said, let's do an episode on social media. And I was like, great, let's do it. Was the fact that you're not on Instagram. So how are you? How are you? How are we doing this episode about social media?
I mean, it was brought up about the fact that you and I had been talking about it on the Radio Milwaukee podcast that,
Yep.
you know, as it relates to messaging about mental health, but also a lot of things that can come up in adolescence, like self-harm, suicidal ideation, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, how that can, the algorithms can go in the wrong direction and amplify those issues. And it
Yep.
seems like, okay, so we're working with social media in the sense that it's kind of mimics reality where there's strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, in my opinion, Gen Z was almost like a experimental generation when it came to technology. And now we're seeing the outcome of that. And as that's happening, there's more talk about legislation to kind of provide some more structure and boundaries within that space. I don't know. I feel like it's super rich for topics. Could go on and on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, gosh, we can get conspiratorial about government overreach.
You got it. Yeah, it's there too.
But yeah, I mean, we weren't technology natives. I remember, probably 1994, 1995, where the internet sort of became ubiquitous to not just like super techie people. Like I remember going from no computer in our house to a computer. I remember going from no internet on that computer to having internet. And like, so that lived experience. So I'd say like millennials grew up in those changes of technology, but we weren't born where they always existed in the way that Gen Z is growing up, where technology's just always been there.
My kiddo sums it up well. My 7.5-year-old, she's like, Mom, I cannot believe that you grew up without a tablet. That must have been so hard.
Yeah, it was for our little ADHD brains. Yes.
Oh, man. So,
We
Jamie, I'm
played
curious.
outside more. That sounds so old. I feel so old saying that.
Yeah, well, and we also had more opportunities for distress tolerance. We had more opportunities to learn how to use creativity and imagination when we were bored.
Sure. We
Yeah,
also like started smoking cigarettes when we were 9. So I don't know. I try not to have too big of like rose-colored glasses about the past.
I know, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what is your takeaway? I'm curious when you're with clients and you think about social media, how do you bring that into the room clinically?
Yeah. I think it depends on, obvious therapy answer here is case by case basis. Obviously, depending on what they're talking about it with. When I worked in higher ed and I was working just with college athletes,
Mm.
for the most part, 18 to 22-year-old athletes, hockey players are older. That's a whole separate topic. But like, so some 22 to 28-year-olds, some older students too, but like college age students, social media was ubiquitous and was a big deal, and it was stressful and dramatic, and they had fights with friends and they broke up and they were on Tinder, and like it was such a, you said earlier, like it's the water we swim in, like it was such a thing that they didn't think twice about it. They would send me like their TikToks that they wanted to talk about in our sessions, like so I think that experience shaped a lot. I'm also a marriage therapist. When I've been in the field long enough, when Facebook wasn't just for college students, it opened up for everyone. How many affairs
Mm,
were started, whether actual affairs or emotional affairs or whatever? How many people are reconnected with their old high school sweetheart on Facebook behind their partner's back? And like, I hated Facebook. I got rid of mine for a while. as a therapist just because of how brutal it was as a marriage therapist when Facebook opened up to everyone, because it started so many affairs. So yeah, I think personally I've always like had a distaste for it. I try not to let that color when it comes up, but I would say a lot of folks now, it's people are coming in asking about dopamine fast. People are coming in asking about reconnecting with nature. I mean, there's a lot of vibe that I give off where that's like a safe and appropriate topic. Like I'm pretty openly a nature person and neurodivergent in that way. So like, I think people know they can talk about that stuff with me, but I try not to be pushy because I am aware that I have my own bias about it.
What would be the other thing? So you have your own bias about social media specifically.
Yeah.
What would be the counter argument to taking a break, engaging with nature? What is the argument for that alternative?
I see, for, again, like I'll go back to when I was working with college students, like for people, I was working at a Christian college at the time. I was in the midst of my own deconstruction, but hadn't left the church yet. So for like a lot of the athletes that I was working with, they were part of the LGBTQ plus community. I was a safe person on campus, but they could not be out for a lot of reasons. And social media was very important for them for feeling connected to a community, having safe spaces to talk to like-minded folks, people who had similar experiences, kids at the college that we were at, kids at other colleges who were living through similar experiences, older people who had lived through and gotten through and survived being at a Christian campus when you're LGBTQ plus. So like from a community building perspective, I think very highly of social media. I think I imagine that Midwestern queer kid who isn't comfortable being out because of their family belief systems, that social media is a lifesaver. And I think that's very important. I think for people who might not have access to it in real life, in their personal geography, vicinity, community building through social media is super important. I think that's most of where I end the good of social media.
I really love that. I agree, and also I found there's really powerful community, right? Like at the base, the community of people, teenage girls who find mentors online, on TikTok, who are talking about their recovery from disordered eating and body dysmorphia. I mean, that's so powerful.
Yeah. I think some of the globalization, but again, that's community building in my opinion. But like seeing a genocide happen in real time is really bad for our nervous systems, but also in mass, humanity speaking out against these things is much easier. This is where we get into like government overreach and stuff like that. But like the way for people to build community through the internet has changed the power dynamics of a lot of structures. Like I work with religious trauma. So like looking at the mass exodus of people leaving the church is because the church cannot limit people's access to information like it used to.
It tries. I mean, I think, to some extent.
Yeah, for sure. It's done it for millennia. It doesn't know what else to do. So I think like that stuff is good. Again, if you're part of a marginalized community, the internet may often be a life source to community that you don't otherwise have access to. And yeah, like normalizing talking about mental health. I think Gen Z, millennials to a degree, Gen Z even more, normalizing talking about mental health, being open about that stuff. It just, like all things can go too far. Like there's suicide talk, like on TikTok, where people post about wanting to die and what their suicide plans are. And like some of that stuff that's like really unhelpful and unhealthy, and like whatever moderation is supposed to be happening to limit that stuff gets misapplied to helpful stuff.
Absolutely. How do we work with that? I think what we're saying is that maybe the good is there. Maybe it's not as with anything, we're going to be more inclined to see the danger because we have to be.
Yeah.
So I appreciate being able to identify the positives and then also figure out with anything, what sort of structures or boundaries do we individually need to manage social media? How do we developmentally apply that as parents,
Yeah.
as adults? And really, how do we distinguish reality at this point? Especially with how technology is going with AI. And
Yeah.
I just saw kittens with like dress up as soldiers. They were very cute and very realistic looking, and it was AI, Jeremy.
Yeah.
It was wild.
I mean, we can edit this out on the back end if we need to, but like your partner works in tech spaces.
Hmm.
And so, like, I think you have perhaps an even more unique perspective, knowing and getting some of the, I don't know how much he talks about his work, but like some of the inside scoop of like, I don't know, cybersecurity. Is that an okay term to use?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I he doesn't talk about it much, and partially because we have a general rule in our life that we don't talk about work, and that's actually pretty
Sure.
nice, right? It's not really on the we don't talk about
Yeah.
it, but um he will tell me things that make me want to live in a cave under a rock.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. I mean, I think it's heavy to work in that space
Hmm.
because his job is to identify threat and mitigate risk. So he's always having a threat mindset, and there are so many ongoing threats
Yeah.
happening at all times. It's terrifying.
Yeah. There's a weird, like, I would say, like, nihilism a lot of us have about, like, at some point, I just stopped worrying about my passwords and was like, please, Google, memorize all of them for me because I can't keep track. Like, I'm ADHD. This is convenient. And also being like, I hate this that a global corporation has access to all of my shit all of the time, but also, like, I can't remember my passwords. So, like, there's some weird acceptance I think a lot of us have about, like, I don't know. If somebody wants to get my bank account, they probably can. Please don't. There's no money in it. So, I mean,
Mm.
have at it, I guess. But also, like,
Speed.
yeah, if you want to see how little therapists make. But also, like, yeah, I don't know. There's just helplessness is the wrong. I said nihilism. I guess that's what I'm going to stand with of like, yeah, I don't know. Google could probably hack into my bank account, even though those passwords aren't linked. Sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's no problem, right?
Yeah.
It is the presence of like since day one, we have never posted our kids' pictures on social media.
Hmm.
Not since day one. Um, out of respect for their own autonomy in a way.
Yeah. Hmm.
You and I, we got to decide when we would make our presence known on the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
And we've just decided as parents to preserve that for them.
Hmm.
So, you know, they will decide we will decide together, but it will be a conversation with them
Yeah.
when they want to be online, when they want their likeness to be online. Um, and we don't have any of the like the Google Dot. Is that a Google Dot? Or like an Amazon Alexa or anything like that in our
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. The smart home stuff that's super creepy and always listening.
Right, because my
Yeah.
partner is like, never. They'll hear everything. I don't want them in my home. And it's
Yeah.
like you said, for me, it's more of like they know where I am at all times anyway, because I've got my phone.
Yeah. There's a satellite GPS tracker in my phone. Like,
Mm.
it was this is a left turn a little bit. Like the pandemic was really weird for the fears that some of the conspiracy theories took advantage of people's fears around this stuff to be
Mhm.
like, no one's tracking you through a vaccine because you have your phone. You're posting your nonsense on Facebook. They already know where you are. Like, what are we doing here, gang?
Yeah.
But I do think there is some of that like loose awareness, conspiracy theories that stick are the ones that are sort of adjacent to reality. Like there is this fear of being tracked. There is this fear of we don't really have individual independence on any level anymore
Mhm.
because of technology. And like, so I think it played on that fear. It got stupid really fast, but like, that's what conspiracy theories do.
Mhm.
But playing on that fear of being tracked, of someone, shadow government, the NSA, whatever, like always knowing where we are. We're like, there's probably some reality to that anyway.
as you were talking, what came to mind for me is the impact that social media has on our brain of confirmation bias.
Mhm.
And like you said, grabbing one little nugget, right? Like one component, one dimension of something, and then almost again amplifying it. And what I think social media does is it reinforces emotional reasoning, which is a cognitive distortion.
Right.
And it almost balloons that out and extrapolates that over and over again. And that, the water we're swimming in now is taking advantage, the powers that be take advantage of this
Yeah.
distorted reality that social media perpetuates.
Yeah, I mean, when the research came out finally on looking at like COVID misinformation, like
Mm.
90% of it got started by like the same five people. None of
Ooh,
them were doctors or vaccine experts, just like Aunt Karen in the UK. Like,
huh,
so, I think if from an oversight perspective or like regulation perspective, I think some of that stuff could be interesting, but like, yeah, there's no way that for-profit capitalistic groups are doing this with humanity's best interests in mind.
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
And
was
the algorithms, like that feedback loop that happens is like it's very easy to get siloed and your information very quickly. Even just, I joke with my brother, he'll send me stuff on TikTok and I don't go on TikTok unless my brother sends me something. And I'm like, dude, you're messing up my algorithm and I don't even use this social media. Like just some of that like connection and what gets recommended to you then is all very creepy. I like to like say really inappropriate things around people who have like their phones open so that they start getting targeted ads for like whatever awful thing I just said. Cause like, yeah, our phones are tracking that stuff. Facebook can try and say it's about proximity and Google searches or whatever, but like, nah, they're listening. The tech people all have tape over their cameras because they don't trust that they're off when they say they're off. Like,
Oh yeah, for sure. We're just products at this point. We've always kind of been products, right? In
yeah,
different
our
ways.
attention. Hmm.
And um my partner always says, if it's free, then you're the product.
Yeah, except for this podcast, of which I track zero data because I don't know how any of it works. But I'm sure Apple Music or wherever you're listening is tracking your stuff. It's just not me.
Right. So the question is ethically, if you did know how to do it, would you do it?
Oh, I like the data. I'm a psychology nerd. I like data and research, but like, yeah, no, I can't keep up with at this stage of my life. I can't keep up with it. Ethically, no. I'm ethically opposed. But yeah, I don't know. That's the nihilism again. Like my only response is to shrug at it. I mean, like, I don't know. What are they going to do with it?
And that is perhaps one of those laws of the universe, right? That the current system we operate in creates a vacuum for unethical people to take advantage of opportunities of power.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
everyone
don't think
else is,
I don't think being wealthy is ethical.
you have to define wealth. I'm curious how you would define wealth.
I don't know. Mega yacht owner,
Okay, so like ultra wealth, like billionaire level.
the 1%.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
I'm not opposed to people owning a home or having a retirement place or like sure.
Mhm, mhm.
Absolutely, we have to pay our bills. Like I hate capitalism and also was born into it. You kind of got
Right.
to do what you can with it. But like, yeah, to be at that level of wealth, there is no ethical way to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's really an interesting moment, perhaps, for social media right now, because there is bipartisan legislation introduced
Hmm.
and oversight committees about, how many people have so much power over entire countries and populations.
Yeah,
And, at what point do lobbyists stop working for Silicon Valley so that they can actually make some, so that we can have some actual legislation to put in safeguards, right?
yeah,
At one point, And I heard this. I have to give this credit too. I was listening to a podcast. Hillary Clinton has a book that's coming out, which sounds very promising. But in it, she talks about how back in the 90s, there was legislation to actually really open up and decrease regulation in like the tech space, from a capitalistic perspective, like let's foster growth, let's get ahead, let's do all of this. And then, she's advocating to pull that back at this point. And part of that is that she used this great example of how there was a time when we had horses and buggies and we needed different laws to navigate horses and buggies. And when the first cars came around, there were no stoplights, there were no stop signs because they weren't necessary. But over time, we learn what we need to be a safe community.
Yeah.
And we create those laws. And I just think that's such a really astute parallel to social media.
Yeah. I'm skeptical about the Clinton track record for deregulation, since that was part of what led to the housing crisis that we're still dealing with the fallout in. But like, yeah, I mean,
she's also skeptical. Like it was her husband who put those things in place.
Yes. As someone who's like so far left that I don't like thinking of being a Democrat.
Step away from anarchism, just like step over the bridge.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I skeptical there too. Again, but like, some of this stuff we're talking about social media, but like some of this stuff goes back to like the Patriot Act and just like the ubiquity of people having cell phones in their pockets and what the NSA was doing and some of that stuff. So like, yeah, I certainly don't trust Meta and Elon Musk and some of the social media companies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the government is a better option. This is where I sound like a conspiratorial hippie. I don't think I hold any deep-seated conspiracies, but like, yeah, these things we're the product, what you said before. Like, yep.
And we are not the puppet masters. And we are at times just following the red herrings where they are supposed to lead us so that the people that are the puppet masters can do what they need to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the issues with social media with that is if we're scrolling TikTok all day and laughing at cat videos, we're not trying to overthrow governments. We're not trying to eat the rich. Like there is some level of like useful distraction from the puppet masters, but also for us on an individual level, like, again, without those rose-colored glasses of the past, like people being like, oh, like everyone takes their phone into the bathroom with them. Like my grandma's got Reader's Digests from 1991 in her bathroom still. Like people have always been looking for some stimulation or some distraction at downtime. Like that's not part of our brains are wired to be stimulated.
Mm-hmm.
The performative nature, the always being on, always being in front of a camera is new and unhealthy. But that drive for distraction has been there throughout history.
Mm-hmm. Such a profound statement, to think about that, right? The difference between distraction and also kind of our nervous system always being on to some extent. And right, that performance, the need to kind of always monitor what will other people think, the comparison that's inherent, those factors that contribute to increased depression, increased anxiety, body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
Being on social media.
The internet is so new still. Like again, people forget 2001. Like, there was a time that wasn't even 30 years ago before regular folks were on the internet. And so because it spread so quickly and it's everywhere now, like we just act like it's normal. It's always been a part of our lives, but it's such a big shift in our history to have this where like we don't even have data and research. We're just now getting data and research on some of this stuff because it's so new to have anything close to like a longitudinal study that has been studying outcomes for years. Like we're just getting to that stage now.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do you as a therapist, what is your like internet social media diet?
Um, yeah, I go on Reddit a lot, and I
Mm.
don't have an account that I'm logged into because like there's a peace of mind that comes with not needing to engage. And
Mm,
like Reddit has a bunch of shitty parts of it too, like I think all social media does. But like for me, that's I like that. I am on YouTube a lot, I will say. When I'm on my exercise bike, I'm playing video games or I'm on YouTube. When I eat my lunch in between sessions, I pull up a YouTube video. Like YouTube, probably, if I'm considering that social media is my largest, the thing I consume the most. And I will say, my YouTube algorithm used to be awesome. And I
mhm,
don't want my kids to have an account. So they use mine so I know what they're seeing. But that has
mhm,
severely messed up my algorithm.
mhm.
Now I get all these Super Mario videos recommended when I just want to watch sports highlights.
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, like what is the content you're looking for? Seeking out. I have a theory
Yeah.
that therapists seek out different content. Is
Oh no, for me, I will say predominantly it's sports stuff. Like
Yeah.
that. I have a sports performance background, so if you want to say that's still therapy related, but like no, I watch pro wrestling and sports clips on
Mhm.
YouTube predominantly. I watch and listen to the pro wrestling. Like pro wrestling is my happy turn off my brain and don't have to think too hard about anything.
Yeah.
So when I'm using social media, when I'm using YouTube for that, like it's entertainment and like
Mhm.
as stress relief, which is what pro wrestling does for me.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas like Reddit is more like scrolling news, politics, getting stuff from different sources, seeing what the average Reddit user, who is a unique, probably left leaning human being, but still like I'm aware of some of the echo chamber there. But um, yeah, I don't know. Some of that stuff is interesting. So Reddit is more of my news headline stuff, whereas YouTube is more of like I don't watch TED Talks. I'm not like doing it's news and sports, or predominantly sports on YouTube and news predominantly on Reddit.
Okay. Yeah. I have found that, I mean, obviously, I'm not really on social media, which is how
Yeah.
you're like, perplexed. You're like,
So
why would someone
really
like
fun to have this conversation with you.
us have this? Because she's not on social media. And actually, I think that's been a potential byproduct of being a trauma therapist is that I inherently, if I'm on Facebook or Instagram, I inherently may have a difficult thing come across my screen.
Yeah.
And that's really activating for me in a very uncomfortable way. And I'm actually just happier not soaking in when I'm not at work. Or I don't even want to call it work. I don't know if you feel that way. I don't like
Yeah.
calling being a therapist work. Like it feels like an actual calling. It's like,
Sure.
right? I'm not just clocking in, clocking out. That's not how that works.
Yeah. I think
Um, but right, like the trauma work I
mhm.
do, I think it's heavy enough that if I'm on social media, I need it to be very, very surface level. Like I am the only social media I have is TikTok. And this is a safe space, Jeremy, right?
I mean, sure. Yeah. I mean,
You're gonna
between you and I, definitely.
Thank
And
you.
we're recording and gonna put it on the internet.
Um, the thing that I watch on my TikTok is cats,
Mhm.
baby animals getting rescued and rehabilitated,
Mhm.
and oddly, rugs getting cleaned. Like really dirty rugs getting
Yeah. Like
scrubbed out,
power washing. Yeah.
and then they're beautiful. That is the
Yeah.
depth of my social media consumption.
I don't know why that's more embarrassing than me admitting that I like pro wrestling.
I don't know. I feel pretty self-conscious when I'm watching a rug get cleaned on my phone, and I'm like, wow.
There's there are power wash video games where you just simulate and you just control the power washer going back and forth cleaning stuff. Lawn cleanup. I get those recommended to me every once in a while. That I think I don't want to say it's neurodivergent because they seem to be just popular in general, but I think there's like a I used to work in a grounds crew and like I said I talked about this on an earlier episode, like the repetitive nature of mowing the lawn mowing all of the lawns at a golf course. Like you're mowing the greens and you're mowing the fairways and the rough, and it's just a lot of mowing.
Yeah.
Um, while that's very boring and sounds bad for ADHD, because I was in nature, I
Hmm.
really liked the repetitive nature. Like I liked the repetitive aspect of the job as long as I was in nature.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge win. I
Yeah.
wonder if I wonder if a lot of folks who are really engaged. So this brings us to teenagers too. Adolescents. uh, We are trained in our graduate programs to be in tune with our regulatory states, so that we can teach others how to be in tune with their regulatory states. So we
Yep.
know this feels, like we're activated,
I
and
will
this
just
is
point of
that.
clarification say you had a good grad program, so you were taught that. I don't think that's every therapist's grad program, but yes,
Okay.
paying attention to our own systems. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yay, UW Whitewater. Give us
Hooray.
props when due. Yes. Um, but right, just that reflective component that's built into the
Mhm.
work we do. I think about how important it is to have that when you're engaging with any internet or any sort of media input, even a book or a newspaper article. Those still exist, right? I still get a little
Yep.
local newspaper. Um, I wonder what it's like to be a younger person and maybe not even know what it feels like to be calm,
Mhm.
and not know what it feels like to unplug.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think it's at least in my work with a lot of folks is a return to nature, doing a lot of grounding. How do we unplug is a word that a lot of people use, but like I do a lot of meaning making work and like people know that's not online. People know, there's some of it's online, I guess. But like again, it's even not being trained in this, I think people are experiencing it. I think young people are again aware of like the mental health crisis
Hmm.
at a different level. And so some of those potential solutions are discussed. I have to check myself often for like my own privilege growing up in a family that highly privileged from an education standpoint. I was poor
Hmm.
and late diagnosed ADHD, and not everything in my life was privileged from an intersectionality perspective, but like a family that prioritized education, and it's like half of Americans don't read above a sixth grade reading level. And like that's a statistic that continues to astound me, but I have to go back to it to remind myself that like talking about structural injustice, talking about government overreach, talking about our nervous systems. Some people are reading at a sixth grade level. Like half of Americans are reading at a sixth grade level. Like some of this stuff, it is easier and far more accessible to go on TikTok and zone out than it is to say, I'm going to go do a yoga class because I know that's good for my nervous system.
Absolutely.
I don't have a follow up. Just
Perhaps
that's a
not.
thing.
Perhaps there is not a follow-up.
Yeah.
There seems to be maybe some opportunity to acknowledge that discourse can only do so much, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay. And
Yeah.
that's
I
okay.
think I think there are people who are burnt out on social media. I think young people are seeing the performative nature of it. And like not all of them. There are people who again are developing eating disorders because they're comparing themselves to photoshopped models. Like
Hmm.
there are some people who aren't seeing through the lens of like this isn't real or this is a skewed version of reality. Some people are just in it hook, line, and sinker. I get that, but I do have some faith and some hope around the people, Gen Z and younger generations who are growing up in it, to see like this is emptiness at the end of it. Like there is no more and more and more is not a sustainable model.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, we have covered the fact that the power balance, like the authorities and the products are both human beings, and one category holds a great deal of power.
Mhm.
One category almost feels like helpless in it and is saying, yeah, whatever, at some point someone's going to see my bank, like that kind of like
Yeah.
nihilism. What are we going to do? The fact that there are communities for people who are otherwise unable to find communities locally in their life IRL. So they're able to access communities globally, and that is a huge protective factor for mental health.
Mhm.
We've also identified that there is significant risks associated because in any situation, right, there's risks and benefits. In some ways it's a protective factor, and in some ways it's dangerous because of the algorithms and the echo chambers
Yeah.
people get into that takes them out of reality into emotional reasoning, and it just really feeling like they're kind of just constantly getting fed what they want to see, which then
Mhm.
creates divisiveness and takes us away from the people in our own communities.
Yeah.
Um, what else have we talked about? I mean, I feel like those are the big ones.
Yeah. Well, there's interesting research, as we're starting to research some of this stuff more. I think one of the things that stands out to me is our generation and older, millennials and older, tend to be really poor about protecting our digital data.
Hmm.
And younger generations are good about that. But
Yeah.
younger generations are really unsafe with their physical data. Like
Uh-huh.
young people are far more likely to give out their address because I think we grew up with all that fear around internet strangers gonna kidnap you. And
Yeah.
like young people don't have that frame of reference because they've always had the internet. They've
Wow.
always had that stuff. And so they tend to be a little more savvy around their digital footprint, but less savvy with like, oh, I could be at physical risk from someone on the internet.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So, I mean, I still think there's so much to learn in this. I
Mm.
think where I land ultimately is like a case by case thing, like each
What I'm
person
curious about.
creating space to be intentional with what technology looks like in your life.
Hmm.
I'm sure for some people, having a Google device or a smart home is super helpful. I can see lots of applications for differently abled folks that having some of
Hmm.
that stuff automated for them is life changing, and that's awesome.
Oh my goodness. 100%. Especially for neurodivergent folks. You
Setting
know,
alarms and having some of that stuff reminding you, regardless of where you set your phone down or what room you're in.
can you imagine?
Yeah,
Sounds
I
fantastic.
mean, sure. I'm not willing to put Google devices all over my house. Uh, but
I
yeah, I think if the internet had stayed like open source and had never been pulled into capitalism, it'd be a different world we were living in.
think it's really interesting, Jeremy, because I think that what initially sparked this conversation was, at least from what I remember, for me, I generally feel pretty optimistic about social media. I think at the end of the day, I tend to lean on there's a lot of opportunity, like you said, for community building.
Mhm.
Yes, there are a lot of dangers. There is danger in all things, and the importance of education and um, appropriate regulation and just awareness goes a long way in being able to amplify the good stuff.
Yeah.
I think I still feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't think banning TikTok on a governmental level is going to change people's TikTok use. Like,
Mhm.
that ship has sailed. I don't know. We've gone through MySpace to Facebook to Instagram to Snapchat to TikTok to what, like,
Mhm.
we don't want to be alone. We as humans don't want to be alone. And
Mm-mm.
so I think regardless of who owns what or what company gets shut down, or hopefully Elon Musk at some point gets taken off the internet, like
Oh yeah, that would just do
these
humanity a great favor.
these like people are going to come back with something. And
Yeah.
if capitalism is the system and we're still in that sort of colonial mindset, someone's
Right.
going to use it for bad reasons.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know. A lot of what I use for like running my business is the thing I have to pay for. But a lot of like what I record, not this, but like some of my in-person podcasts last time we recorded in person, and like I use an open source program for that. I don't know what that means. I just know it's free and that like the people who do understand it keep it running smoothly. VLC Media Player is still
Oh,
what I use
yeah.
because it's open source and you don't have to pay for it. It's not behind the subscription model. So I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful we can navigate overthrowing a lot of the capitalistic colonialist mindset while not totally collapsing civilization. Because I do think that's sort of where we're headed, where people are sick of the subscription models. They're sick of not physically owning their stuff. Like there are people who are saying, I'm just doing this because like everything else sucks. So here's a program that's free and anyone can use it. And like, I'm not doing it to track your data. I just hate the system that everyone else is using.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So like I like that stuff, and that stuff gives me hope that like yeah, there's a way to do some of this to keep the good stuff and maybe not get rid of all the bad completely, but like
Mm-hmm.
have less of it
Absolutely.
would be cool.
Absolutely.
I don't know how long that'll take.
Wow. Right. Right. There's both the macro and the micro. The
Yeah,
macro is the systemic look. Oh, you're a family therapist, Jeremy. You're going to be looking at the systems. You're like,
correct.
how
Yeah.
do you?
And I talk about like colonial mindset and I talk about colonization a lot more now at this stage in my life than I ever did before. I mean, some of that's because I'm privileged enough to be at a stable place in my life where I can dissect some of that. A lot of that for me was leaving the church, where now I look back and see the systems inherent in racism and control on the systemic level that the church uses, but also colonizers have used, whether it was church based or just we have a bigger military than you. Like, so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
capitalism is just a vehicle towards control. And again, like while we can say technology might get rid of some of the bad, like humanity has also tried to control other humans throughout history. And so when we get rid of capitalism, there'll be something else.
You are one step away from anarchism. You're so close. You're so there, Jeremy.
I know. Well, you know, when I left the church, it was optimistic nihilism. Like that's where I was for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
there's still a flavor of that. I think we're
Mm-hmm.
beings that shouldn't exist, spinning on a rock at 600,000 miles an hour. We're here for 80 years. I don't know. There's some value to watching cat videos, I think.
100%. 100%. I think that's so powerful, right? And I mean, everything. It's if you really think, like if you think about Marxist theory and you think about the idea of the base and the superstructure, and the base kind of setting the tone for the superstructure. So the base is basically the means of production. Superstructure is basically culture and like our perceived reality. So whoever controls the means of production controls reality and controls our lived experience. And as much as we can be objective observers of that process, we are empowered to acknowledge that there are tools that we can take to help us. And there are things we can just say, fuck that shit. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't need that. We don't have to. I mean, yes, we live in a capitalist ocean, right? Like, that's the water we're swimming in. And if we can kind of elevate ourselves above the water and see what else there is, we are better able to navigate the waters themselves.
Yeah. And I don't identify as a Marxist because I think that has the philosophy sounds much better than the application's ever been. But
Oh,
like being a cult, somebody who works with religious trauma and working with like different cult structures, like most of these entities, some of them are a grift from the beginning, obviously scams. But a lot of stuff that turns cults into cults starts with like a fuck all this. Let's go build a utopia of our own. Everyone helps everyone. It'll be lovely. And like it ends up not being, because it's really hard to, I think, actually like decolonialize a lot of that stuff. And like there's still human error involved. It's hard to let go of our implicit biases. It's hard to set up any structure that doesn't include in-group out-group dynamics. Like, so it's I don't know. It's where I kind of land with like I don't have an answer necessarily. I try not to be doom and gloom about it. I'm an optimistic nihilist. But no, like anarchism's very appealing to some part of my brain, and another part of my brain like wants human connection and craves community. I don't want to go live in a cave by myself, because when my brain is well stimulated, I like people all right. If I'm understimulated or overstimulated, I don't much care for people. But like so again, like finding, I have all these different networks, and different groups do different things for me, but like part of meaning making for me is like the pagan folks I know who are non-theistic, and like ritual is very important, even though we know it's just our brain tricking itself into caring, that like caring still matters. And so if we can provide intentional space for that, cool.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. But that's what works well for me.
Yeah. Huh. I love that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
younger me also loved V for Vendetta, and like, yeah, let's just blow it all up and start over.
Yeah. We are.
I don't support, advocate for violence.
Yeah. And maybe at the end of the day, we acknowledge that we really are not, like, we have this sentience, this awareness of the world. And at the same time, we are just witnesses. We kind of have this belief that we know more than we actually know. And we can get duped, right? Get duped into things because the reality testing of our consciousness is subpar.
Yeah.
So
we're self-aware mammals at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, exactly. So, maybe it's worth just really putting that all into perspective. I think that if we could all just acknowledge that we don't really know much, and that the best we can do is be self-aware and mindful and present in the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe things would feel a lot less complicated.
Yeah. And I like, I talk about like colonization a lot more than I used to. I talk about healing in community a lot more than I used to. Like, again, I think some of it is leaving the church. Some of it is understanding my diagnosis on a different level. Some of it is having kids has given me a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there are a lot of things that have changed. I've been in the mental health field for 15 years. So hopefully I've changed.
We're old.
Yeah. But like, that perspective shift, I think is a good thing. And also like not everyone's there. Again, like there's some memes of, was it Chris Evans looking in the mirror where he's joking about himself at 13 and at 20 and at 30, and like, yeah, I don't know, it's good to change as we get older. I maintain some optimism. I maintain a lot of optimism about the younger generations. I don't know that that's specific to social media. I have my days where I'm like, this fucking sucks and we should never ever have created it and let's get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know.
Maybe social media isn't the problem. Maybe it's a lack of awareness. Maybe it's the system in which social media exists.
Yeah, I think social media is neutral. I think it's a lot of how people use it. I think it's a lot about the larger systems using it.
Mm-hmm.
Nefarious, but like nefarious sounds so comical, but I think that's the correct word. Like, I think Meta is a nefarious company. I think Twitter is nefarious. Like, ExxonMobil is obviously nefarious, but like I think so are these social media.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Yeah, I think it's the system, the structure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think all of that is fixed by having a different democratic socialist or Marxist or even anarchist. Like, again, but if we can have the idea that like we're self-aware mammals spinning on a rock that should have never existed, like I think that provides us some opportunity to be present and like make your community better than it was. Like that's a worthwhile pursuit.
100%. And maybe social media is yet another red herring that's taking us away from the true issues.
Yeah.
At play.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But also some little kids out there are growing up conservative Christian and learning a lot because they're on social media, or somebody is being raised as a capitalistic human and they're seeing like that has significant flaws. So
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. We just kind of landed where we started with like, pros and cons.
I think for me, the coolest part of this was that, yeah, there's pros and cons, right? Like day to day pros and cons. Big picture, is it seems pretty darn likely that social media is just like any sort of, it's like water. It has currents, it
Yeah.
moves, it can get contaminated, and it can also cleanse. And it is, like you said, neutral. It's just a matter of the forces around it.
Yeah.
And
The radio was going to corrupt the youth. Newspapers were going to corrupt the youth.
yep,
CDs were going to ruin the music industry. Like, there have been panics about all of these things. The printing press also was very limited in who had access and control to print the
yeah,
information they wanted. So, like, some of this isn't new,
no,
looks different.
wow. Thank you. This was great. I'm glad we did this. How do you feel?
I feel good. I like having these conversations.
I am definitely going to take that visualization of like who's polluting the waters of the internet, who's helping
Yeah.
clean up the waters of the internet. Yeah,
Hmm.
interesting. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Are you swimming in
This
safe
was the
water, or are you swimming in dangerous water? And
Yeah, that harm reduction approach to the
that
internet.
experience. Yeah, I'm going to take that with me. I'm using it now.
Love it.
I'm using it
Love it.
now.
You already name dropped, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
Um, I would be curious. I don't know if you have folks that comment on the podcast and things. We should see if there's any interest in another topic, like some sort of ambiguous topic that's worth exploring.
Yeah.
I'd be
Yeah,
curious.
it's not out yet, but it will have been out by the time this episode's out, as we just did an episode on burnout. I'm starting, this is your second time being on the podcast, and obviously you and I have known each other for years before I started a podcast. Um, but I am starting to repeat with people because I like the one-off interview, and
Mhm.
that's interesting, and I love to highlight and promote people
Yeah.
who are doing good work and help people connect with them. But also scheduling is hard for me
Mm,
as an ADHDer, and I think we can do some of these deep dives on certain topics. A lot of the professionals who have highlighted on podcasts are awesome and doing great work, and also have a lot of wealth of knowledge on various topics.
mhm.
So, but yeah, I mean, peeking behind the curtains, like, no, I have a Patreon. I don't understand how it works. Like, I don't know where people could comment. My media person has to post the podcast on Apple because I refuse to use Apple products. So, like,
Interesting. Okay, well, if some
there's
messages
some
get your
pieces
way,
of this.
this
There's
was a
some
great
pieces of
one.
this that aren't all firing on all cylinders.
That's okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad we did this. This was cool.
Yeah. So, when people listen on your end and they tell you what they want to hear, it was easy. You said, should we do a social media episode? I was like, yeah, let's do it. You name dropped Radio Milwaukee. We both were on the Uniquely Milwaukee podcast for 2 episodes talking about suicide prevention. This episode will go out after September's done, but we also will have done an event around music and art and mental health. And so, like, yeah, I don't know. I'm that community mindset is very important to me and ethically aligned with my values. For like, I have a lot of things I could talk about. I just don't know what's meaningful to people. So I like the collaborative approach of, if you want to hear us talk about something, let us know.
Yes, please. Thank you, Jeremy, for doing this. Thank you for
Yeah.
offering this space. It's super great.
Yeah. Emily, awesome to have you. Awesome to chat. As always, if people want to work with you or learn more about your work, your new practice, where do they go? How do they find you? Because you're not on social media.
Not really. Yeah, right now I am probably easily found on Psych Today, looking up Renewed Focus or looking up Emily Vander Velden. That's probably the easiest way to go since there's a direct link. Um, Also a website, renewedfocuswi.com. Um, I'll probably have some more marketing out. It's just, I got to have a slow opening. And so I'm,
Yeah.
getting professional photos taken in a couple weeks. And I think once I get those done, I'll be able to get more stuff out there, but it's not my normal wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Size Today website.
Yeah. And we'll have the links to that stuff. I will say photos on your website are tough because it's like mine have my boys a family photo on there. It's for people who like care that I'm a parent and that's
Mm.
important to them. And like, do I update those? You know, it's all marketing's weird.
It is.
There's a lot of weird questions around it.
I'm wondering if it's inappropriate or unprofessional for me to get a headshot holding my cat.
I don't think so. I guess it depends on what face you're making because you could really come across. I think Jim Gaffigan, the stand-up comedian, does a bit where he's saying glasses make him look smarter, but then he like puts them on crooked and says like, but if someone's wearing their glasses like this, you know not to approach them. So
Oh, that's funny. I know. I just
yeah,
love her. I think she'd be so pissed. She'd be like, no, I'm not doing this.
I took some weird like senior photos because again, I was neurodivergent and didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't know. Again, like we don't really grow up that much beyond our high school selves. So like this is just the adult version of your high school senior pictures. Like, yeah, I don't know.
You're right.
One of my a classmate of mine got a picture holding like a wooden owl, and that was like his senior picture that he used for the yearbook. And like that has aged very well. That's still very funny. So yeah, I don't know if you're weird and you're getting weird clientele and other neurodivergent folks. I think it speaks to that.
Right. It might serve as a very appropriate filter.
Correct. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
TBD.
yeah, we'll put a link to your website so people can keep an eye out for your potential cat lady picture.
Thank you.
Yeah, so people can find you. Emily, it's been awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
And to all our wonderful listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, we'll be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.